Hi, readers. Mrs. Bryant here, coming to you with session 4 of our fantasy reading and what sophisticated readers of fantasy do. So, we already talked about how we have to research the setting of fantasy novels to get a better understanding. We talked about how we have to learn alongside the main character because, as readers, a lot of times we're learning the same time that the characters are learning. And then most recently, we talked about tracking those multiple plot lines. And we already see in Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe how there are a few different plots going on at the same time. Right now, Edmund is with the witch and they are on their way to the stone table. And Edmund is kind of, going through a little bit of a hard time right now. So we're following Edmund on his own, but then we're also following the rest of the kids with Mr. and Mrs. Beaver as they also try to make their way to the stone table. So as you get into these complicated texts, you're going to see that there are multiple plot lines. And today I want to talk to you about suspending judgment about characters and places. So suspend means to end, right? Um, and judgment means, think about how you judge people or you judge characters. I'll be honest, I judge Edmund right now. To me, he's a terrible character. From the beginning, he's been a terrible character, right? He's been very beastly, as they said, and just mean and sneaky and lying to everyone. So, this session is going to tell us that we should kind of stop judging characters or refrain from judging characters and places until we actually know about them. So let's take a little look into this. So some characters are not always what they seem. What can we learn about characters if we study them deeply? So what are their motivations, okay? As readers, it's important to suspend judgment about characters before we really get to know them, and it's especially true now in our fantasy books. There may be a character that we think is really great, who turns out to not be great, or a character who's really mean in the beginning and turns out to not really actually be that bad. So let's look at two characters from Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. We've got the Queen, or as we know her as the White Witch, and we've got Edmund. Okay, so we're going to take a little look-see here, and we're going to talk a little bit about the White Witch and is she who she seems to be? Okay, so this was a part that we talked about before. Remember when Edmund meets the White Witch, she offers him sweets, those Turkish delights. She seems like a good character, so it's really easy for us to like her. I know she looks really nice, but then we find out her motivations, right? And we soon realize that she's actually the enemy. So she kind of tricked us, and I do think I showed you this video before.
What is it now, Ginnebrick? Make him let me go! I didn't do anything wrong!
How dare you address the Queen of Narnia?
I didn't know!
You will know her better hereafter.
Wait. What is your name, son of Adam?
Edmund.
And how, Edmund, did you come to enter my dominion?
I'm not sure. I was just following my sister.
Your sister? How many are you?
4. Lucy's the only one that's been here before. She said she met some faun called Tumnus. Patron Susan didn't believe her. I didn't either.
Edmund, you look so cold. Come sit with me.
So I'm not going to watch that whole part because I know we did see that previously. But just right there, look at how nice she seems. Think about in the story right now where we're at with the White Witch and how she's treating Edmund. Okay, so she's not really this nice queen that we were first introduced to. The next thing I want to talk about is Edmund and can characters change? So we know that we have talked about characters all school year, right? When we read the Naked Mole Rat letters, we talked about Frankie and how in the beginning she was, just getting into, or I should say, she was a good kid, right? And then she was lying and she was sending all those emails. Do you remember that book that we read in the beginning of the year? Frankie was sending all the emails to Rat Lady, and she was skipping school and she was lying. And then, I mean, her kitchen ended up catching on fire. Her little brother ran away, all because of her. So in the end, we found out that, yes, she did change again. And even Frankie, when we talk about characters, when we talk about, I'm sorry, not Frankie, Ellen Tolliver most recently, right? So Ellen, she was a really kind of lazy girl. This was when we read Tolliver's Secret, and then by the end of the book, she was brave and she was courageous and she did things that she never thought she would. But can characters really change, especially Edmund? So do you remember when Edmund traveled to Narnia and then Lucy found him? He came back, he lied to his siblings about being there. And just from the beginning, Edmund is very unlikable, okay? He lies, he's rude, he seems selfish. Do we think he can truly change? And that's the question that we ask ourselves. But that's why it's so important as readers that we have to not get so angry over how certain characters act, because there might be a reason that they're acting this way. So let's watch a little bit of this.
Oh, Edmund, you got in too. Isn't it wonderful? Where have you been? With Mr. Tumnus. He's fine. The White Witch hasn't found out anything about him meeting me. The White Witch? She calls herself the Queen of Narnia, but she really isn't. Are you all right? You look awful. Well, what do you expect? I mean, it's freezing. How do we get out of here? Come on. This way. Peter, wake up! Peter, wake up! It's there! It's really there!
Lucy, what are you talking about?
Narnia, it's all in the wardrobe like I told you.
Oh, you've just been dreaming, Lucy.
But I haven't! I saw Mr. Thomas again, and this time Edmund went too.
You saw the fawn?
Well, he didn't actually go there with me. What were you doing, Edmund? I was just playing along. I'm sorry, Peter. I shouldn't have encouraged her, but you know what little children are like these days? They just don't know when to stop pretending.
Ow!
How do you like Edmund in that part? He is really not likable, okay? It's important to not judge characters based on just a few moments with them. So if we truly study them over time, we might come to find out that our first thoughts about them are actually wrong. So if we think about Edmund, you know, why is he acting that way? Maybe he's feeling, you know, he's not the oldest and he's not the youngest. He's sort of in the middle there out of the four. I mean, as middle as you can get. And you know, he might be feeling like he's in the shadow of Peter and Susan, and everybody gives Lucy a lot of attention because she's the baby, you know, of the family. And maybe he's acting out because of that. I mean, that's not a good reason, but it's important for us to understand that characters may not always be what they seem, okay? We know that they have traits that seem to contradict, like kind and cruel. And, you know, I always relate to Harry Potter. I don't know how much of you have read that, but there's a character there, Snape. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the movies at least. And in the beginning, oh my gosh, he is the one of the characters that as readers, or if you're watching the movie, you are just like, no way. They are terrible. He's out to get Harry. What is the issue? And then if you watch all the movies, or especially read all the books, you find that there's a backstory to Snape, and that even though he seems terrible, it's not as bad as what you originally thought. Okay, so as we go further into this book, just remember that maybe these characters are not always what they seem. We've already found out that the White Witch is not what she seems, and the important question that we need to ask ourselves is, can Edmund change? He's our biggest one that we need to think about. Do you think he's going to change? Do you think he'll make the right decision? Okay? Will he have remorse? Things like that. Just remember, readers, that as you are going through these more complicated texts, you're going to have to research the setting, you're going to have to learn alongside the main character, you're going to have to track problems, but you're also going to have to hold back on judging the characters until you really get to know them. Okay, let's read some more.